They thought they could replace me with two MIT kids and call it progress. That's the part that still makes me smile. My name is Ethan Moore. I'm 56 years old, Director of Research at Argentum Technologies. For 15 years, I built them a revenue machine they didn't understand, and today they told me I was too expensive to keep around. Felix didn't even try to hide the satisfaction. He sat there tapping his fingers on the walnut conference table like a metronome for my humiliation. It's nothing personal, Ethan. Just business, he said, voice dripping with corporate empathy he didn't mean. Marjorie from HR had the real knife. She slid the yellow folder across to me with that gentle, trained voice. Severance package, 2 weeks pay per year, 3 months of health coverage, career counseling, as though that was supposed to make it dignified. I flipped it open, read it carefully like a contract always deserves. Then I closed it, set it neatly back on the table, and folded my hands. Thanks, I said, calm. Felix blinked. He expected anger, pleading, bargaining, at least a show. No questions. I looked him right in the eye. No. He shifted just enough to tell me I'd unsettled him. Marjorie glanced nervously at him, like a dog waiting to see who'd get kicked. I stood slowly pushing in my chair with her deliberate care. Good luck with the MIT kids. Silence. I walked out without giving them the satisfaction of watching me break. Down on 28, my office felt smaller than usual. The hum of old HVACs, the smell of worn carpet that I'd stopped noticing years ago. On the desk sat that miniature piano Jake bought me at his first grade fair, the keys worn shiny where I'd tapped them during calls. Max lifted his head from under the desk tail, thumping once. Always loyal, always watching. I knelt, pressing my forehead gently against his. "It's all right, buddy," I whispered. "We're not falling, we're jumping." He licked my hand, warm, solid, real. I stood and pulled a cardboard box from the bottom drawer, slow, deliberate. The photo of Jake at his MIT graduation went in first, the piano next. The award from last year so proudly given by Felix himself, that felt like an insult now. Voices in the hall dropped as I opened the door. Colleagues stared at their screens, pretended not to see. HR must have spread the word. "Careful, everyone. Ethan's out. Don't catch what he has." I paused at the mirror by the exit. Salt and pepper hair, creased face, but my eyes were clear, sharp. No, I wasn't finished. I was just changing roles. My phone buzzed. "Jake, Dad, you okay?" I stared at it for a moment before typing carefully. "I'm fine. You're about to see the best chess move of my life." Outside, the San Francisco wind cut through my coat. Max pressed close, sensing the shift. I squeezed the leash, feeling the leather bite. They thought they'd closed the door on me. What they'd really done was build me the perfect stage. Stay with me. This isn't the ending they wrote. Subscribe and watch how I turn their farewell into my checkmate. They were about to learn firing me was only their opening move. I held the cardboard box tight against my side, feeling the weight shift with every step. It wasn't heavy in the usual sense. Just the kind of weight that settles in your chest when you realize everything you built fits in a single worn-out container. A photo of Jake beaming at his MIT graduation. The cheap miniature piano he'd bought me at a school fair, its keys smoothed to shine by years of tapping through late-night calls. An award plaque that had seemed like recognition. Once before, today turned it into something closer to mockery. Max stayed close, his nails clicking quietly on the tile. He didn't need to know the details, he just knew this walk felt wrong. Marjorie trailed behind me, the clipboard clutched to her chest like it was a shield. She'd switched off the HR warmth the second we left the conference room. Now, she was all business scanning the corridor ahead, as though afraid I might bolt. We paused at the elevator. She cleared her throat and held out her hand. "Your badge." I unhooked it from my belt, the plastic clip snapping a little too loudly in the hush. She avoided my eyes as she scanned it through the reader by the elevator, the red light blinking once revoked. Company policy. Her pen hovered over a line on her form. "Do you have any remaining property belonging to Argentum?" I let out a breath. "No, Marjorie. It's all right here." She gave the briefest of nods and ticked the line. We didn't speak on the way down. The elevator hummed softly, the floor counter blinking away my tenure one number at a time. In the lobby, the security guard glanced up and gave a stiff nod. I remembered his name was Luis. He used to say good morning, like he meant it. Today he wouldn't meet my eyes. Marjorie's voice dropped another half step in warmth. "We need you to sign the IP acknowledgement." "Of course. Always the paperwork." I set the box carefully on the floor, balancing it with one arm while I took the pen in the other. All work product developed on the company time and equipment remains the property of Argentum Technologies. I signed my name in clean practiced strokes. Marjorie took the clipboard back and pressed her lips together. Thank you for your service. It wasn't gratitude, it was procedure. I picked up the box and gave her the smallest smile. Be careful, Marjorie. One day he'll tell you the same thing. She flinched. Not much, but enough. Max pressed close to my leg as we turned and walked out through the glass doors. The air outside hit colder than it had any right to be San Francisco's late-day light, spilling over the street like it was trying to make the city look honest. Max bumped his head against my knee, whined once. I rested my hand on him, fingers curling in his fur. Yeah, buddy, I said quietly. I know. We walked slowly, deliberately. My thumb brushed over the edge of the box, with each step feeling the groove of the photo frame beneath the cardboard. I remembered the day Jake gave me that piano, so proud of a $2 carnival prize. Remembered the late nights with him asleep upstairs while I tapped out old jazz tunes, waiting for deployment tests to finish. I stopped at the curb and took a deep breath. These weren't relics, they were reminders. A shop window across the street caught my reflection. Gray hair tousled by the breeze lines, etched deep into my face from years I'd given them without question. But my eyes were steady. They didn't see it yet. But this wasn't surrender. Max barked once, a short, eager sound that made my mouth twitch at the corner. I looked down at him. Come on, I murmured. We're not done. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I shifted the box and fished it out, thumbing it on. Jake's message glowed at me. You okay? I stood there a moment, wind biting my ears, watching Max sniff the sidewalk like nothing had changed at all. I typed slow, deliberate. Better than okay. They just gave me the reason I needed. Max nudged me forward. I adjusted the box in my arms, felt its weight settle against me like armor. I turned my back on Argentum's shining lobby and stepped into the street, each footfall steady. They thought they'd finish my story, but they hadn't even seen my first move. The jazz bar in Oakland had that low, murmuring quiet that made every conversation feel like a secret. The wooden floor creaked under the weight of old history, and the glow from the brass lamps turned the haze of smoke into something warm like candlelight. I chose a corner table with my back to the wall. Max settled under the chair, chin on my boot, eyes tracking the room with that patient, watchful calm he had. My bourbon sat untouched. I wasn't here to drink. Greg Sullivan walked in at exactly 8:00 p.m. He didn't bother scanning the place. He knew I'd picked the darkest corner. His hair was silver combed back with nothing showy about it. Navy suit, pale shirt open at the collar. Power worn by a man who didn't have to prove anything anymore. He sat down opposite me without saying a word at first. Let the silence work. Ethan Moore. His voice was rough, like he'd smoked too many years or argued too many boardrooms. Greg. We shook hands. Firm. No showmanship. His eyes flicked to the cardboard box on the floor and to Max's calm stare. Felix must have enjoyed that little performance today, he said finally. I didn't bother hiding the bitterness in my breath. It wasn't personal, just business. Greg huffed a laugh that didn't sound amused. That's always what they say when they're cutting you out. He signaled the bartender for a drink, then pointed to my glass for a refill. 2 weeks per year, he asked, voice low. 3 months of health coverage, career counseling. I let the words hang there like an accusation. He shook his head slowly. 15 years, and that's the thanks. Yet I watched the way the amber liquid swirled in the glass. They think it's over. Greg leaned in slightly. Is it? Max lifted his head at the tone in my voice. No, I said. Greg let that answer breathe. He wasn't a man who rushed. I need to know, he said eventually, how much of what they built was you. I felt my fingers tighten around the glass. Enough. He studied me, carefully waiting. I exhaled slowly. I didn't take anything from them. Not on company time, not on their hardware. But the algorithm, I tapped the box with my foot gently. I refined it on my personal machine, filed the patent in my own name. It's clean. Greg's eyes narrowed, assessing. Legally airtight. I nodded. Airtight. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes warmed slightly. Show me. I bent, lifted the flap of the box just enough for him to see the envelope tucked between the photo of Jake and that battered piano. Patent confirmation. Signed, notarized. Greg didn't even reach for it. Just nodded once like he was cataloging the leverage. That's your insurance. No, I corrected quietly. That's my invitation. He sipped his drink, eyes never leaving mine. They'll come after you. I leaned back in my chair. Let them. I know what I built. I know what they failed to patent. Greg chuckled once deep in his chest. Hell of a play, Ethan. I looked down at Max, who blinked slowly at me, tail thumping once on the wood floor. I'm not here to burn them to the ground, I said softly. I'm here to remind them who taught them to build in the first place. Greg raised his glass slightly in salute. And you want a new workshop? I nodded. Not just for me, for my team. He leaned back considering. Bring them. I'll pay them what they're worth. I want them knowing the door's open. I turned the glass slowly in my hand, letting the ice clink once. I don't just want offers, I want guarantees. Greg's smile was thin, but it was real. You'll have them. Max let out a long sigh under the table, finally relaxing. I set the glass down, pushed it away. Get the contract ready. Greg inclined his head once, slow, deliberate. Tell me your story in the comments. Subscribe so you're here when I reveal what happened next. We hadn't even signed yet. ChatGPT said, I stepped out of the jazz bar into the cool Oakland night, the door closing behind me with a soft thud that felt like the end of one chapter and the start of another. The street was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic headlights casting long, patient shadows along the sidewalk. Max trotted at my side, nails clicking against the concrete. He looked up at me once, ears flicking in question, as if waiting for me to tell him what came next. I didn't say anything yet. Instead, I let the night air clear the last traces of smoky bourbon and old regrets from my head. My car sat parked a block away. I popped the trunk and placed the box carefully inside. Jake's photo sat at the top, the miniature piano pressed against the cardboard. The envelope with the patent papers was tucked safely at the bottom, like a buried weapon. I paused there for a second, letting my fingers rest on the edge of the box. These weren't trophies, they were promises. Max nudged my leg gently. I scratched behind his ears and exhaled. We drove slowly through the city windows, cracked to let in the night. Max settled into the passenger seat, his head on the armrest, watching me like he understood I was turning something over in my mind I wasn't ready to say out loud. And my phone buzzed in the cup holder. Greg's message, get your team ready, contracts in the morning. I stared at the screen. Simple words, heavy meaning. Recruiting them wouldn't be an invitation. It would be an ultimatum, a chance to jump ship or go down with it. I knew the way Argentum worked. Felix would waste no time branding me disloyal. They'd call it poaching. They'd threaten legal action, lean hard on their NDAs and non-compete clauses. But the truth was, I wasn't asking them to steal anything, just to remember what they were worth. I parked outside my apartment, killed the engine, and sat there in the hush of the idling city. Max shifted once, laying his head on my lap. I scrolled through my contacts slowly. Miguel, Anita, Danielle, the ones who'd sat with me for countless whiteboard sessions, built products in code and sweat, and trusted me when budgets got slashed. I thought about their faces in those last meetings. Tight smiles, tired eyes, nodding along to Felix's speeches about efficiency and growth, while watching their own value get whittled down to a line item. I tapped Miguel's name first. He picked up after 2 rings. Ethan? Yeah, listen carefully. Silence on the line, then the sound of shuffling, maybe stepping out of earshot. Talk to me. I'm out, effective today. Severance. Badge gone. A harsh exhale. Jesus. I close my eyes. I'm not calling for sympathy. I know. There's another table being set. Nova Dynamics. Greg's in. He wants us. All of us. Another silence. Is it safe? I let the question sit. I built the algorithm on my own machine. Filed it myself. Argentum never touched the IP. It's clean. Miguel didn't answer right away. Then he laughed. It wasn't happy. Felix will shit himself. I allowed myself the smallest smile. They'll fight it, threaten you, make you feel like you're betraying them, but they already chose who they valued. He exhaled again, softer. What about Anita Daniel? I'm calling them next. I'm not making anyone do anything, but this is the offer. Quiet, then firm. Ethan, say no more. I'm in. I felt a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt all day. Sleep on it, I said quietly. Think hard. This isn't easy, but you'll be valued. Understood. Call me in the morning. I hung up and leaned back, staring at the ceiling of the car. Max licked my knuckles once warm and steady. Anita would be harder. She had family to think about. Daniel had his own doubts, but I'd make the call anyway. Because this wasn't about revenge for me alone. This was about proving we weren't replaceable. Max let out a small yawn, settling back into his seat. I ruffled his ears and took one last look at the dark apartment windows across the street, imagining tomorrow's calls, tomorrow's contracts. They thought letting me go would end it, but That was just the first call. Nova's headquarters sat on the edge of the bay with glass walls that caught the morning light and threw it across the polished floors in long, sharp lines. I walked in with Max at my heel, his tags jingling softly in the quiet, empty lobby. He paused once to sniff the air, then pressed close against my leg like he sensed the weight of what I was about to do. Greg was waiting for me just inside the conference room. He didn't bother with pleasantries, just a curt nod and a flick of his eyes toward the stack of folders on the table. "Coffee's fresh," he said. "Didn't know how you take it." "Black," I muttered, setting the box down on the chair by the wall. Jake's photo stared out at me from the top, a reminder of why I wasn't backing out. Greg slid one of the contracts across the table. Heavy stock paper, embossed logo, legal text that seemed to go on for miles. "This is the C-suite package," he said evenly. "Chief Innovation Officer, 7-figure signing bonus, full control of product development, royalty override on IP licensing." My fingers brushed over the cover page. Max let out a short huff of air and laid his head on my boot. Greg didn't speak for a moment. He just watched me read. "There's a clause for your team," he said eventually. "Full retention bonus. Matches your terms. We want them happy, loyal." I flipped a page. Non-compete language carefully carved. "Argentum's going to scream," I said quietly. "They can scream all they want," Greg replied. "They can't challenge the patent. You filed it clean. They never saw a line of code you wrote on your own time." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Your people have doubts, Ethan. Miguel told me Anita's worried about the NDA. Daniel's afraid they'll blacklist him." I set the contract down slowly. "They have every right to be. Argentum doesn't forgive easy." Greg didn't move. "So sell it to me. Why will they follow you?" I exhaled, looked at Max. "Because they're the ones who built it. Felix never saw their worth. He'll never see them coming." Greg's mouth twitched into that half-smile he wore when he knew he'd won. I picked up my pen, but I didn't sign yet. I watched the light crawling across the floor, thought about every meeting where I'd seen Miguel's eyes go dull as Felix droned about cost-cutting. Thought about Anita carefully budgeting her hours to see her kid's soccer game, only to get penalized on her performance review. Daniel getting saddled with QA because the new hire couldn't write a bug-free function to save his life. They deserve better. I deserved better. I pressed the tip of the pen to the line and felt the smallest tremor in my hand. Max let out a tiny, encouraging whine. I signed. Greg didn't congratulate me. He just took the contract and placed it in the stack. One by one, the door opened for the others. Miguel, eyes sharp but wary, took his seat and scanned his copy, signed without flinching. Anita hesitated the longest. She rubbed the back of her neck, breathing slowly before setting her name down in looping script. Daniel needed my nod. I gave it once firmly. He signed. When they were done, Greg gathered the contracts like he was collecting ammunition. He didn't say anything grand. "Welcome to Nova," he said simply. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound Max's tail brushing the floor in small sweeps. Miguel glanced at me. "You sure about this?" I met his eyes. "No," I admitted, "but I know I'm more sure than staying where they didn't want us." He snorted softly. "That's enough." I let my gaze wander across the room, over the contracts, over the people I'd dragged here. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who had finally stopped apologizing for wanting better. Greg cleared his throat. "We'll send the press release first thing Monday. Argentum's going to lose its mind." I nodded slowly. "Good." I reached down and scratched Max's head, feeling the warmth of his fur under my fingers. They thought cutting me loose would save them money. But the ink wasn't even dry yet. Monday morning at Nova's headquarters felt like the calm before a storm that everyone knew was coming. The building was all glass and steel, but the light spilling through those giant windows couldn't soften the hard edge of anticipation in the room. I walked in with Max at my side. He paused at the threshold, sniffed the air, then followed me without a sound. My box was already waiting in my new office. The patent envelope sat on top its edge, peeking out like a quiet threat. Greg was already there tapping his tablet against the table, eyes fixed on something none of us could see. He looked up when I entered and gave the barest nod. "Morning." "Morning." Max settled by my chair and let out a long breath that seemed to echo what I was feeling. The team filed in one by one. Miguel with his ever-present notebook, Anita clutching her coffee like it was armor, Daniel glancing around with that mix of fear and excitement I remembered from every launch meeting. Greg didn't waste time. He tapped the screen, and the giant monitor on the wall lit up with the press release draft. Nova Dynamics announces appointment of Ethan Moore as Chief Innovation Officer. Greg read aloud, voice calm and cool. exclusive licensing of the account sphere algorithm. 6-person engineering team transitions to Nova effective immediately. I scanned the words, clean, deliberate, no wasted language. But every line was designed to send Argentum into a tailspin. Anita cleared her throat. They're going to come after us. I met her eyes. Let them. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. Greg continued tapping through bullet points. IP licensing terms are clear. Ownership notarized. Patent number included. No mention of Argentum's name. Legal advised we keep it clean. But anyone paying attention will know exactly what this is. Miguel let out a short laugh, no humor in it. It's a declaration of war without saying it. I sipped my coffee. They picked this fight the day they decided they didn't need us. Greg's fingers moved over the tablet. Going live in 10 minutes. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Max let out a small whine and pressed closer to my leg. I reached down and scratched his head, the repetitive motion calming both of us. Anita finally spoke up. My husband's going to see this on LinkedIn before I even call him. I know, I said softly. Talk to him first. Tell him why you did it. She nodded, eyes glistening just once before she blinked it away. Daniel was tapping his knee with nervous energy. They're going to blacklist us. Greg glanced at me, waiting. I didn't look away. Only if they think they can win, I said evenly. We're not stealing anything. We're offering what we built legally, and we're doing it together. That's the difference. Max shifted again, his eyes following every voice in the room, like he understood this wasn't just noise. Greg's voice broke the hush. 5 minutes. I stood up. Look, this isn't going to be easy. Argentum will threaten smear, try to call us thieves. But the work, it's ours. The patent is clean. They can't touch it. Miguel let out a slow breath. They'll still try. They will, I agreed, so we make sure we're worth more than their accusations. Anita's shoulders relaxed just a notch. Daniel finally nodded, once the fear still there, but dulled by the edge of resolve. Greg clicked a button on the tablet. The screen switched to the announcement interface. Ready, he asked, not looking at anyone in particular. I placed a hand on the table, feeling the weight of all those decisions settling into my bones. Do it. Greg hit send. For a moment, nothing changed. Then his tablet chimed once, twice, a third time. Miguel's phone buzzed. Anita's too. Daniel glanced at his screen and swallowed. I looked down at Max, who was watching me like he always did, waiting for my cue. I bent and whispered, "Here we go." Greg started reading notifications aloud, voice impassive. TechCrunch picked it up. LinkedIn trending in the Bay Area. Twitter already has a hashtag. Anita exhaled shakily. Holy shit. Miguel's mouth twisted into a grim smile. They're going to lose their minds. I let out a slow breath, settling my thoughts like pieces on a chessboard. Good. Max let out one soft bark that sounded entirely too knowing. We just fired the first shot. The morning after the announcement felt like standing in the eye of a storm, quiet, but you could see the damage spiraling all around you. Nova's offices buzzed with a new energy that didn't exist last week. The glass conference room was crowded with my team. Greg, a couple of PR people tapping furiously at their laptops, and me sitting at the head of the table, Max curled under my chair, like he was guarding the entire plan himself. Miguel's laptop screen projected onto the wall showed news feeds updating in real time. Argentum shares down 8% at open. Tech blogs dissecting the move. Screenshots of the Nova press release with my name bolded like a warning shot. Greg stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, eyes scanning the feeds like a general watching troop movements. Anita's voice cut through the clicking keys. Argentum just issued a no comment to the Journal. They're not ready. Daniel let out a short, almost disbelieving laugh. They didn't see it coming. I didn't smile. I watched the ticker symbols crawl by. Argentum was still a giant. They'd recover from an 8% drop unless we kept the pressure on. Greg turned to me. Your team's trending on LinkedIn. Miguel leaned back in his chair, arms folded. They're getting messages already. Recruiters. Congratulations. Even some old Argentum people asking if there's room. I rested my elbows on the table. They're not our worry. Felix is. Max shifted under the table, pressing against my boot. I rubbed his side with my foot slowly. Anita lowered her phone. I've got a friend in Argentum HR, she said carefully. They're calling all hands meetings today, locking down comms, telling people not to comment. Daniel's smile faded. That's real panic. Miguel didn't look away from the screen. Or it's them preparing to hit back. I let out a breath. They will. Felix doesn't take embarrassment well. Greg finally moved, stepping into the middle of the room. That's why this matters. We don't gloat. We don't break NDAs. We don't get sloppy. They'll look for any crack. Anita's voice was low. You think they'll sue? I met her eyes. I know they will if they think they can win. She swallowed hard. I don't want to fight in court. I tapped the patent envelope lying next to my coffee. You won't. I made sure of it. This is ours. Legally, clean. Daniel watched me carefully. Feels dirty anyway. I didn't argue. Maybe it is, but they made it necessary. Greg nodded slowly. That's the message, he said quietly. Not revenge, value. Miguel let out a breath, pushing his chair back slightly. Meanwhile, Felix is going to be in front of the board, explaining why half his R&D just walked. I allowed myself the barest smile. He'll blame everyone but himself. Greg's tablet chimed. He glanced at it and snorted. Investor call scheduled for noon. Bet you anything they're rewriting their entire strategy. I picked up my coffee, held it close, letting the steam fog my glasses for a second. They won't stay down. They'll counter. They'll threaten by loyalty leak rumors. Daniel's fingers drummed nervously on the table. What do we do when they do? I didn't blink. We stay better, cleaner, more valuable. They built an empire on ignoring the people who made them great. We don't repeat that. Max let out a long, low sigh under the table, like even he knew this was going to get ugly before it got better. Anita wiped at her eyes, once angry she even had to. We left them because they stopped caring, she said quietly. Now we prove that was the mistake. I nodded once firmly. Exactly. Greg cleared his throat. Investor chatter is already spiking. Analysts are noticing. Argentum's going to lose another few points today. Miguel watched the screen update. Look at that. Down 10% since open. I leaned back in my chair, scratching Max's ears gently. They're bleeding, but they'll figure out where the wound is. Daniel let out a short breath. Us. I didn't disagree. I picked up the patent envelope and tapped it gently against the table. They underestimated what this means. They thought talent was replaceable. Miguel's voice was dry-tired but satisfied. Today they learned it isn't. I nodded once, settling the envelope back on the table with deliberate care. Max shifted again, his eyes following my every move like he was memorizing it. We'd just turned a threat into a promise. The Nova conference room felt different that afternoon. Sunlight slanted in through the glass walls, glinting off the polished table like it wanted to interrogate us. Screens all around the room displayed real-time stock tickers, news feeds, and an ever-scrolling list of social media mentions. Argentum's logo kept showing up in headlines next to words like plunge panic and mass exodus. Max lay stretched beside my chair, his head resting on his paws, eyes flicking to every new voice that joined the conversation. The patent envelope sat in front of me, unopened since the signing. Just its presence on the table was enough to keep us focused. Greg stood at the head of the table, tapping his tablet with 2 fingers in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. Argentum's shares closed down 12% today, he said calmly. Investors want blood. Their board's going to be screaming for a fix. Miguel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. They're not going to roll over. They'll come at us. Smear campaigns, legal threats, maybe even try to buy us off. Daniel shook his head, the fatigue obvious in the slump of his shoulders. Felix doesn't buy people. He tries to break them first. Anita sipped her coffee, eyes locked on the headlines. HR's leaking all over the place, she said quietly. My friend says they're scrambling to fill our roles, telling everyone we were disloyal, unstable. I let the words sit for a moment, studying the way they reacted. Max shifted, pressing a little closer to my boot. I gave his ear a slow scratch. They're afraid, I said finally. This isn't about us stealing anything. It's about them realizing they can't replace what they threw away. Greg didn't smile, but his eyes narrowed with something like approval. That's the message we keep hammering, not revenge, value. Miguel glanced at me. You're gonna talk to them, aren't you? I nodded once. They'll reach out. They have to. Losing us isn't just talent, it's credibility. No one wants to partner with a company bleeding staff. Daniel swallowed hard. You think they'll offer to buy us out? I tapped the envelope in front of me gently. They'll try to license the algorithm, maybe try to negotiate exclusive terms so no one else gets it. Anita frowned. And you'd consider it? I held her gaze. I'd consider them paying for what they undervalued, on our terms. Greg finally broke his silence. They called this morning. The room fell silent. He continued tapping his tablet again. Felix didn't call personally. His CFO did. Wants to set up an initial talk. says they're ready to discuss mutually beneficial licensing terms. Miguel let out a bark of laughter that sounded more tired than amused. Mutually beneficial. That's rich. I didn't smile. They're testing the water, seeing if we're desperate, seeing if they can undercut us. Anita shifted in her seat, rubbing her temple. Are we? I met her eyes without blinking. No, we're not. Nova's backing us. Our IP is clean. The press is on our side for once. We don't have to take scraps. Greg's voice was low. They'll come back with something bigger. Felix knows he can't let this stand. Daniel drummed his fingers on the table. What do you want to do? I picked up the envelope again, weighing it in my hand like it was heavier than paper. I want them to pay. Not just money, I want them to say it, to admit it, that they need us, that they were wrong. Max let out a quiet, satisfied huff, his tail tapping once on the floor. Greg's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to me. We'll draft terms, he said quietly. Triple standard licensing fee. Non-exclusive rights only. We keep IP ownership. Mandatory authorship credit. Miguel nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. Triple, he said. You think they'll choke on that? I finally allowed the corners of my mouth to lift just slightly. They'll try, but they'll pay it, because they don't have a choice. Anita sat back in her chair, exhaling slowly. And if they don't, I set the envelope back down with deliberate care. Then we keep building and make sure they can't catch us. Max shifted again, pressing his nose against my leg, eyes bright and waiting. Greg's tablet chimed softly. Felix just sent another meeting request, he said evenly. This time, it's from his personal account. I didn't even look at the screen. Good, I said. We hadn't even named our price yet. Felix didn't call until Tuesday morning, which told me exactly how long it took for his pride to crack. I was already in my new office at Nova when Greg knocked once and stepped inside, tablet in hand. Max lifted his head from under the desk and watched Greg with lazy suspicion. Felix wants a video call, personally. I didn't look up right away. I tapped the patent envelope sitting next to my coffee mug like it was a loaded weapon. Set it up. Greg nodded once and left the room without a word. 10 minutes later, the screen on the wall lit up. Felix's face appeared tight with forced calm. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed the truth he couldn't hide. Ethan, he began, voice strained with the effort of civility. Appreciate you making the time. I didn't bother smiling. Let's talk terms. His lips twitched. I think we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement here. Max let out a small huff, shifting at my feet. I reached down to rub his side without looking away from Felix's image. Define mutually beneficial, I said evenly. Felix hesitated. Our board is willing to discuss a licensing deal, reasonable rates, exclusivity options, IP sharing for ongoing development. I let the silence hang for 3 full seconds. No, his eyes narrowed slightly. No, to which part? All of it. He drew in a sharp breath. Ethan, let's not make this personal. We're talking business. I felt something cold slide into place behind my ribs. That's what you said when you fired me. He shifted uncomfortably. That was a mistake. I can admit that. I leaned back in my chair. You want the algorithm, you want the team. Here are the terms. I watched his eyes flicker as he braced himself. Non-exclusive license. Triple standard industry rate. We retain full IP ownership. Mandatory authorship credit on all implementations, public and private. He tried to keep his face still, but the corner of his mouth twitched once. Triple. You heard me. That's extortion. I let the silence answer that for me. He shook his head slowly. You know, the board won't agree to that. Then they can watch their stock keep bleeding. Max gave another quiet huff. Felix glanced away from the camera for a moment, probably at someone off screen. I can offer double rate. Exclusive rights? No. His head snapped back. Why? I tapped the envelope again, slow and deliberate. Because this isn't about locking anyone else out. It's about proving you can't lock us out anymore. He didn't say anything. The seconds ticked by, each one heavier than the last. You think you're in control here? He asked quietly. I didn't answer. He swallowed once hard. Your team, they were good, but we can replace them. We always have. I felt my teeth pressed together, but I forced my voice calm. You tried? Look at your stock price. His mouth opened, closed. They left because you made them feel disposable. I continued, voice level slow. Now you pay them what they're worth. You admit they're the reason you're not collapsing entirely. He exhaled shakily. Your terms are outrageous. I didn't blink. Accept them or walk. Max shifted again, pressing closer like he could sense the line being drawn. Felix's eyes dropped to something on his desk. He didn't speak for nearly 30 seconds. Finally, his voice cracked just a little. Fine. I didn't smile. Say it. He looked back at the camera, eyes dark. Triple rate. Non-exclusive. You keep the IP. Authorship credit. Good, I said quietly. He didn't speak. Greg's voice came over the speaker from just off screen. We'll send the revised contract within the hour. Felix nodded once, a stiff jerk of his head. Send it. Then the screen went dark. The room fell silent except for Max's breathing. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, and let the weight of it settle. Not just winning, forcing them to admit it. Greg stepped in, slowly, tablet in hand. He said yes. I nodded once. They didn't just pay the price, I said softly. They admitted it. Max let out a quiet, satisfied sigh, his tail sweeping the floor once. But this wasn't over. ChatGPT said, the contract came through at 9:12 a.m. on a Wednesday. Greg slid his tablet across the table without a word. The signature block at the bottom of the PDF glowed faintly, digital ink capturing Felix's name in crisp strokes that felt strangely personal for something so cold. Max lay under the table, watching me with calm, steady eyes, like he could sense the gravity in the air. Miguel read over my shoulder, arms crossed. Triple rate, non-exclusive, full IP acknowledgement, authorship credit in perpetuity. His voice was flat, but there was something tight at the edges. Anita sat across from us, coffee in both hands. She looked tired, not the good tired. The kind that came after a fight you weren't sure you should have won. Daniel was quiet. He hadn't said a word since he walked in. Greg cleared his throat softly. They signed. Funds will transfer on a quarterly schedule. Standard net 30 terms. Royalty kicker if adoption exceeds projections. I set the tablet down slowly. Max nudged my leg, pressing his nose against my ankle like he wanted to remind me I wasn't alone. I reached down and gave his ears a slow rub. This is it, I said quietly. Anita's eyes flicked to mine. It's done. Greg didn't blink. For now, they can't claw it back. It's legally bulletproof. Miguel let out a short, humorless laugh. Felix actually signed this himself. Greg nodded once. Felix, CFO, legal, board sign-off, everyone. Daniel finally spoke, voice low. They're paying us for what they called worthless. I didn't say anything for a moment. Let the words settle like dust in the corners of the room. Max let out a long sigh, resting his head back on his paws. Anita set her coffee down with a quiet clink. Feels dirty. I didn't disagree. It was never going to feel clean, I admitted. Not after what they did. Not after how we had to do it. Miguel shook his head, staring at the table. They'll recover. Eventually, they'll spin it. Make us the villains. I nodded once. Let them. We'll make sure anyone watching knows exactly why this happened. Greg scrolled through the contract summary on his tablet. We need to finalize the PR statement. He projected it onto the wall. Draft language. Careful. Precise. Nova Dynamics is pleased to announce a licensing agreement with Argentum Technologies for the Account Sphere algorithm, reinforcing our commitment to recognizing and rewarding innovation and talent. Anita read it once, then exhaled sharply. Recognizing and rewarding, she repeated. That's the line. That's the message. Daniel looked at me. You believe it? I felt the weight of the patent envelope resting on the table, a small, simple folder that had caused so much upheaval. I have to, I said quietly. Max let out a little grunt of agreement. Greg didn't look up from the tablet. They want to release their own statement by noon, softens the blow for their investors, calls it a strategic partnership. Miguel snorted. Strategic partnership, that's rich. I let a small, bitter smile tug at the edge of my mouth. Let them call it whatever they want. We know what it really is. Silence fell over the room. The only sound was the quiet hum of the building, and Max's slow, even breathing. Anita finally spoke, voice low. Was it worth it? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached over and picked up the envelope, turned it over in my hands. This was never about revenge, I said slowly. Not really. It was about making them see us, forcing them to recognize what they lost. Daniel's eyes were unreadable. And now, I set the envelope down. Now we build something better. No politics, no games, just good people doing the work right. Greg locked eyes with me. We have their money, their signature, their public concession. I nodded once. They paid. They admitted it. But we're not done. Miguel let out a breath. So what's next? I looked around the table at the faces that had bet everything on me. Max shifted ears, flicking as he listened. We won the battle, I said quietly. Now we have to build the future. The news broke before sunrise. My phone buzzed with a steady stream of alerts, TechCrunch wired Bloomberg, all pushing variations of the same headline. Nova Dynamics signs blockbuster licensing deal with Argentum. Max lifted his head from where he lay, curled at the foot of the bed, ears perked. I gave his side a slow, reassuring pat. In the quiet before dawn, I scrolled through the headlines. Industry analysts hail licensing agreement as a game changer. Argentum pays triple industry rate to retain critical algorithm. Inside the deal that forced a Silicon Valley giant to admit defeat. Each headline felt like a nail in the coffin of the story Felix would have preferred. By the time I walked into Nova's office, the team was already gathered around the conference room table. Screens flickered with news feeds, LinkedIn posts, congratulatory messages from ex-colleagues. Miguel sat forward, elbows on the table, reading a blog post aloud. Nova's deal with Argentum sends a clear message to the tech industry: you can't treat talent like disposable assets. He looked at me, eyes sharp. They're not even trying to hide the subtext. Anita scrolled through her phone, slowly, the glow of the screen lighting her tired face. Half of LinkedIn is cheering. The other half is warning us to watch our backs. Daniel didn't say anything, just watched the screen's jaw tight. Greg stood at the head of the table, tablet in one hand, tapping slowly with his thumb. Investor calls all morning. Nova's stock jumped 5 points at open. Argentum's is still down 12. Boardroom's going to be a bloodbath. No one smiled. Max wandered in from my office and sat beside my chair, leaning against my leg like he could sense the tension in the room. I rested a hand on his head, fingers moving automatically through his fur. Any word from Felix, I asked. Greg shook his head once. Nothing personal, just formal acknowledgement from their legal. Funds transferred this morning. They're calling it a strategic realignment in their PR statement. Miguel let out a humorless laugh. Strategic realignment, that's corporate for, we got our asses handed to us. Anita's voice was quiet. My sister sent me an article this morning. She said she's proud, but she asked if it was worth it. Silence settled like dust in the corners. I didn't answer right away. Max let out a low sigh and pressed closer. We did what we had to, I said finally. We didn't steal anything. We didn't cheat. We just forced them to see us, to pay us what it was worth. Daniel's eyes didn't leave the screen. They'll paint us as traitors. I nodded once. Let them. The people who matter will know the truth. Greg scrolled through a feed of analyst commentary. This deal could redefine compensation and retention strategies across the sector. He paused. Companies that treat engineers as commodities risk a mass exodus. Anita rubbed at her eyes. I just wanted to do my job, build good things. I leaned back in the chair, fingers still in Max's fur. So did I. Miguel snorted softly. Didn't think it would end up being a goddamn morality play. I gave a thin smile. It always was. We just refused to see it. Greg glanced at me. Press wants a comment from you. Everyone does. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I turned slightly and looked at the patent envelope propped on the shelf behind me. A simple manila folder, but the contents had toppled an entire company's illusion of control. Max followed my gaze, then looked back up at me with quiet, patient eyes. I'll talk, I said finally. But we don't gloat. We don't burn bridges. We don't make this about revenge. Anita's voice was rough but firm. Then what do we make it about? I met her eyes. About proving the work matters, that the people who do it matter. Greg nodded once. I'll draft a statement. Miguel leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Think they'll ever forgive us? I paused. Maybe, maybe not. But they'll never forget. Max nudged my hand again, tail-tapping once on the floor. I looked around the room at the faces of people who had trusted me enough to jump off a cliff with no guarantee of landing. We hadn't just rewritten the contract. We'd rewritten the rules. The news about Felix's resignation hit the wires on a Monday morning. I was in my office at Nova Cup of Coffee, cooling on the desk, Max snoring softly under my chair. The screens around me lit up with headline after headline. Argentum CEO steps down amid licensing fallout. New leadership promises cultural overhaul. Industry watches as Nova sets the standard for retaining talent. It felt surreal. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just heavy. Greg knocked once and stepped in holding his tablet. He didn't say anything at first, just turned it so I could see the screen. Felix's public statement was short and polished, apologetic without admitting fault. The kind of language that got reviewed by a dozen lawyers. I'm stepping down to allow Argentum to heal and move forward, it read. Miguel wandered in behind Greg, reading over his shoulder. Healing, he muttered. That's one way to put it. Anita followed, coffee in hand, eyes red like she hadn't slept. They're already shopping for a new CEO, someone with employee-first branding. I didn't respond right away. Max shifted under the desk, ears twitching as if he could feel the tension vibrating off all of us. Greg cleared his throat. Richard Donovan's the interim. Board is making noises about a full culture audit. I let out a breath. Good, let them do it. Anita sipped her coffee slowly. You think it'll work? I paused. I think they're scared enough to try. Miguel slumped into a chair, arms crossed. Feels strange. We didn't want to burn them down. Just make them see. I glanced at the patent envelope, now tucked away in a filing drawer behind my desk. They didn't see us until it hurt. Greg sat down across from me, folding his hands on the table. Nova's already getting calls. Vendors want to partner. Investors want to back us. Analysts calling it the new model for engineering retention. Anita let out a quiet, humorless laugh. So we're the case study now. I didn't smile. Let them study us. Let them learn. Max got up, slowly stretched, and wandered over to nudge my leg. I reached down and ran my hand over his head, grounding myself in the simple, loyal weight of him. Daniel joined us, late eyes scanning the room. It's official. Argentum sent over the final payment confirmation. Full licensing fee. Authorship credit on every rollout. Greg didn't react. Read the note they attached. Daniel handed me his phone. We hope this agreement signals a new chapter for both companies. I set the phone down. They want this over, I said quietly. Anita's voice cracked a little. Is it? Silence. I looked at the team one by one. People who'd bet their livelihoods on me. It is for them. For us, it's just starting. Miguel snorted softly. You mean building the thing we said we would? I nodded. Exactly. No games, no politics, just honest work. Innovation that respects the people who make it possible. Anita blinked quickly and smiled for the first time in days. About time someone did. Greg stood and smoothed his tie. Media's going to want an interview, the official Nova statement. How do you want to play it? I considered the words carefully. We keep it simple. We thank Argentum for recognizing the value. We highlight our commitment to our team. No gloating, no cheap shots. Miguel raised an eyebrow. You're serious. I met his gaze. Always was. They paid because they had no choice. Now we prove we were worth every cent. Max let out a soft, contented huff and settled at my feet. Anita drained the last of her coffee. So, we're really doing this, rebuilding it all from scratch. I let out a slow breath. Not from scratch, I corrected gently. From experience. Greg tapped his tablet, locking the screen. I'll get the PR team aligned. Daniel stood stretching. Guess I'll get back to onboarding the new hires. Miguel cracked a grin. I'll keep refining the product roadmap. Don't want Argentum catching up too fast. Anita picked up her notebook and paused. Ethan. I met her eyes. Thank you, she said simply. I nodded once. Wasn't just me. She smiled, turning to leave. As the room emptied, I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight finally begin to shift off my shoulders. I glanced down at Max, whose tail thumped once slow and steady. Outside the window, the city sprawled in shades of glass and concrete, lit by the pale promise of morning sun. I picked up my phone, scrolled through the congratulatory messages I hadn't answered yet, paused. Then I typed a single line to the Nova internal channel. We did good work. Let's make sure it wasn't the last time. I set the phone down, exhaled slowly, and ran a hand over Max's fur. For anyone who's ever fought to be seen, you're welcome to stay. I've got more stories to tell.